So, what exactly can be said about Sagittarius rising energy? So, some of the keywords that immediately pop into my head are exuberant, happy go lucky, larger than life, optimistic, overindulgent. Sagittarius energy can be a bit much, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just because Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, everything with Sagittarius is larger than life. Now, this video on Sagittarius rising is a part of my rising sign series. And so the last video that I did was all about Scorpio rising. And Scorpio energy takes you down into the depths of your soul and your psyche. It's very substantive and deep, to put it lightly. It's also very intense. Now, think of Sagittarius energy as sort of the opposite. Now, Sagittarius energy doesn't lack in intensity. It's just that where Scorpio takes you down into the depths, Sagittarius takes you high and up into the stratosphere, into a whole different dimension. Now, if there's one thing I have to say about Sagittarius energy that I love, it's that it is very optimistic. Sagittarius is big picture focused. So when it comes to sort of being around Sagittarius and interacting with Sagittarius, and that also includes Sagittarius rising energy, you tend to sort of change your mind. You tend to focus more on the bigger picture, on the larger map, than on the details and the substance of whatever it is that you're talking about or dealing with, right? Sagittarius has a way of getting you to expand your mind and broaden your horizons, sometimes whether you want to or not, all right? However, like I said, that Sagittarius energy is going to hurl you into a new stratosphere. And trust and believe, we all need that at some point in time. Sometimes we need a pivot. We need a perspective change. And change is definitely something that Sagittarius is familiar with. Change is something that Sagittarius will often get you to do. And again, broaden your horizons and expand your mind. All right, so buckle up, baby. It's going to be a hell of a ride with this Sagittarius rising energy. All right, so as you can probably tell, this video is all about Sagittarius rising, and it is a part of my rising sign series. All right, so stay tuned. You definitely don't want to miss this. Hello, my loves. As always, I hope that this video finds you well and in excellent spirits. So if this is our first time meeting, welcome. My name is Mel. I'm a professional astrologer, and I'm the founder of Divine Feminine Works, where I help people unlock their divinity and discover their magic. And as always, if you are returning, welcome back. So we're keeping the party going with our Rising Sign series, and today we are talking all about Sagittarius rising. All right, so that would mean that you are someone who's a Sagittarius rising if in your natal chart you have Sagittarius as the first house. All right. So, what I want to preface this video by saying is that these characteristics, these rising sign videos, I should say, are general. It literally means that you've got Sagittarius as your first house. So, essentially, what that means is that with Sagittarius as your first house, there are certain characteristics that you will share with other people who have Sagittarius as their first house, namely their physical characteristics and sort of how the world perceives them. Now, if you find that these characteristics don't necessarily vibe with you or you don't necessarily resonate with them, that's fine. It's really because everyone has a unique natal chart. And so even though there are certain characteristics that all Sag risings share, there's going to be some differences here and there based on your particular natal chart. So again, these videos are general. Now, if you want to know more about your specific natal chart and how Sagittarius rising may play in your life, then definitely consider scheduling a session with me. My signature service is called The Blueprint. This is where I read your natal chart from soup to nuts and help you understand the greatest subject of all, which is you. All right. And if you're interested, link will be in the description box below and tagged to this video. All right. So without further ado, let's get into the details of Sag rising. So first things first, let's cover the basics. Let's talk about rising signs, what they represent, and what they even are. So if you're not new to this series, then you can definitely skip this part. So your rising sign is part of your big three, namely your sun, your moon, and your rising sign. Now together, these three signs form the basis of your personality. It's like your essential foundation. Think of it as like a three-faceted diamond, right? So, by way of an overview, your sun sign represents your ego and your personality. Think of the sun generally. It shines, everything orbits around it, it exudes warmth and rays of light, and that's exactly what your sun sign does. It's how you express yourself outwardly in the world. Now, by contrast, we have our moon sign, and our moon sign has everything to do with our inner world. It represents our emotions, our subconscious, and it represents how we perceive the world on an internal level. So, sun sign, outward expression, moon sign, inward expression. Now, I like to think of or categorize our sun sign and our moon sign as subjective because it really depends on us, right? How we express ourselves and how we perceive the world is something that's very personal to us. On the other hand, we have our rising sign. I like to call our rising sign objective because it's really how the world sees you. So it has nothing to do with what you think or feel. It's really how the world perceives you and sees you. Your rising sign is like the sign or the billboard that you carry around that everyone can see and perceive. So, whereas sun sign and moon sign subjective, rising sign is objective. So now that brings us to the question, what is a rising sign anyway? So, by way of astrology jargon and an official definition, your rising sign is the sign that was rising on the eastern horizon at the moment that you were born. So think of it as like your personal sunrise. It literally represents your entrance into this world, right? Your incarnation into this world is represented by your rising sign. Okay. Simple as that. Now, the other thing that I want to mention about your rising sign is that sometimes you will hear people use the term rising sign or ascendant interchangeably. Or I should say rising sign and ascendant interchangeably. However, there's a slight nuance between the two definitions. So your rising sign is literally just the sign, right? So if your first house is Sagittarius, if your first house is Virgo or even Gemini, then your rising sign is Sagittarius, Virgo, or Gemini. Now, the specific degree that the eastern horizon was at the moment that you were born is known as your ascendant. So, if you look at your natal chart and you see in the first house, you'll see these letters AS or ASC that represents your ascendant, and it's the specific degree. So, whereas your rising sign could be Sagittarius, your ascendant would be 12 degrees of Sagittarius. It's a slight nuance, but it's important because depending on what house system you use in astrology, your rising sign and the house and all of that stuff there could be little slight differences or changes. All right. So just to keep in mind, your rising sign, the sign that was rising on the eastern horizon the moment you were born, your ascendant is the specific degree that the eastern horizon was at the moment that you were born. All right. So those are the basics when it comes to rising signs. Now let's get a little more specific and talk about Sagittarius rising in particular. So, what does the Sagittarius rising look like or act like? Like, that's the quintessential question that you would be asking when it comes to any rising sign. So, Sagittarius rising has a very distinct look. I mean, I should say that about all the signs because all the signs have a distinct look. But when you're talking about Sagittarius rising, you're talking about typically someone that has some height to them. They have a strong kind of build, right? Kind of athletic, even. But most importantly, it's how they make you feel. Sagittarius energy is very expansive, right? Like I mentioned before. And they have this very sort of open aura about them that could be very inviting, right? So, more so than how they look, it's how they make you feel. And it's open, optimistic, and all of that good stuff. Now, every zodiac sign rules a certain part of the body or an organ. And so when we're talking about Sagittarius, we're talking about the hips. And one of the interesting things that I've noticed in everyday life, in real life, is that people with prominent Sagittarius energy typically have distinctive hips, especially the women. Now, what I also found interesting about this is that this almost is identical to the mythology of Sagittarius. Now, we all know the glyph for Sagittarius is the arrow, but when it comes to the mythology of Sagittarius, Sagittarius was a centaur, meaning half man, half horse. And clearly, the bottom half of a centaur is kind of large. You can't miss it because it's a horse's ass, essentially. And so people with prominent Sagittarius, and I mean no shade by that. People with Sagittarius, prominent Sagittarius energy typically have distinctive hips. They may have thick thighs. They may have a big butt, even, right? That can definitely clue you into someone who's got Sagittarius rising. Now, they also have a very I want to say exuberant kind of features. So their eyes can be bright and wide. Again, they have this very open and inviting aura, this optimism, if you will, and that can be reflected in their features. So very bright eyes, could have high cheekbones. Their physical structure is more on the athletic kind of side. But either way, if the hips don't lie when it comes to Sagittarius rising. Now, in terms of the other characteristics of Sagittarius, as Sagittarius rising, Sagittarius is your first house, like I mentioned before. So clearly it governs your physical appearance. However, it also governs how you think and your outlook on the world. And so when it comes to sort of how you see the world, and more importantly, how the world sees you, it's all about Sagittarius energy. So if I haven't said it enough, Sagittarius energy is very exuberant, it's very optimistic. Sagittarius typically will find the silver lining in any situation. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and so Jupiter is expansive. It is larger than life. And so, as a Sagittarius rising, your mannerisms may be larger than life. Like, you're sort of like you can't walk into a room without being noticed, or maybe you're kind of loud. And I don't mean any shade by that, but you definitely let your presence be known, right? Sagittarius, I should say Jupiter is the largest planet in our solar system. So you can't necessarily ignore it, right? Now, apart from that, you tend to have a very far reaching outlook when it comes to things. Whereas a sign like, let's say, Virgo or Scorpio will be kind of enmeshed in the details and in the substance of something, Sagittarius sees the bigger picture, the overarching theme of something, seeing things on a higher level, maybe even, your perception of the world is from a higher level of consciousness because that is just the energy signature of Sagittarius. Okay. So again, you tend to be optimistic, exuberant, and you tend to have that effect on people as well. You can't help but kind of be in a good mood, or you can't necessarily help wanting to embark on an adventure, learn something new and different when you are when you're around Sagittarius or Sagittarius rising. Now, Sagittarius energy is very much concerned with things that are different or foreign and with travel. Hence, why Sagittarius energy has the signature of, travel, obviously, and wanting to experience different cultures, different beliefs. One thing I've also noticed about Sagittarius energy is that it loves to engage in debate, right? Not necessarily to be argumentative like Gemini, perhaps. No shade with that either, but Sagittarius likes to understand different viewpoints, likes to enmesh itself in different ideologies, right? So, whereas Sagittarius won't necessarily agree with what you're saying, they would like to hear you and understand your perspective. And that could be anything from religion to politics, to any sort of world foreign affairs. Like I said before, Sagittarius is all about expansion, especially expanding your mind and broadening your horizon. So you have a very broad view of the world. You may be someone who's very like open to a lot of different things, a lot of different lifestyles. Again, it's not to say that you agree with it. It's just that you see it for what it is. You understand from a higher consciousness perspective that everyone is meant to be different and has different experiences in life. And the last thing I'll say about Sagittarius energy, and of course, Sagittarius rising energy and the energy signature of Sagittarius, is that it has a very spiritual element to it. So I said before, Sagittarius energy, it's almost like tapping into higher consciousness levels. It's seeing the bigger picture. And inherent in that is spirituality. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're spiritual. You could be someone who's religious. However, you understand that there is a power greater than us. You understand that people have different religious, different creeds, and faith and belief are very much enmeshed in how you think and how you see the world. So people with Sagittarius rising tend to have a little taste of spirituality. Sorry, my phone is going off and I forgot to turn that off, so try to ignore that. Um spirituality over the top and just really seeing the broader picture of life and always finding a silver lining in any situation. All right, and speaking about life, now let's talk about the different areas of life that a Sagittarius rising will experience with that energy signature. So, what is life like for a Sagittarius rising? What do they experience in life based on their natal chart and their astrological design, right? So, as I mentioned before, as a Sagittarius rising, Sagittarius is your first house. And so, that rising, that Sagittarius rising, is what sets up the rest of your natal chart. And so, to understand the different areas of our lives, we look to the houses in the natal chart, and each house is governed by a sign. So, the flavor of that sign will let you know what that area of life is going to be like for you. So, let's get into some areas of life that a Sag rising would experience or how they would experience. You know what I mean, right? So, anyway, Sag rising, first house, we already covered that. Now, the one thing I'll say about the houses in your natal chart is that not all houses are created equal. Some are slightly more important than the others. And the ones that are most important are your first house, your fourth house, your seventh house, and your 10th house. These are known as the angular houses. And if you want to know more about the houses, I did a video all about it. You could check it out right there after you watch this video, of course. So they're known as the angular houses, and these are the houses where you have the most dynamic energy. These are the houses that initiate things. They're sort of bold, and in our lives, the angular houses are sort of like exclamation points. So again, we already talked about your first house. Let's talk about your fourth house, which is your house of home and family. And for you as a Sag rising, that is going to be Pisces. So when it comes to home and family, everything takes on a very Piscean nature for you. That means that the emotional bonds when it comes to your family, particularly your parents or your grandparents, is probably very strong. There could be a strong spiritual influence at home when it comes to the people that you live with. There's lack of boundaries, maybe. I could go on and on about this. However, home and family could be a very sensitive area for you because Pisces is a very sensitive sign. So when it comes to your seventh house, your house of relationships, it is Gemini. And above all else, when it comes to your marriages, your committed relationships, and your partnerships, you guys are very much about intellectual stimulation and communication. You also tend to be a little busybody when it comes to your relationship. So commitment may be a thing for you in the sense that maybe you're not exactly committal. However, above all else, the intellect is probably the most important facet of your committed relationships. And then your 10th house is the house of career and public life. Our 10th house really is exactly what it sounds like. And it's the highest point in the natal chart. And it also is sort of how you shine, right? The 10th house in the natal chart represents noon, during the day. So it's when the sun is the brightest. And for you, your 10th house is Virgo. So when it comes to your public image, your public persona, and your career, it's not only service oriented, but very Virgo like. So, very analytical, detail oriented, demure, and mindful. Okay. So, those four houses represent the basis of not just even your personality, but of who you are as it pertains to your natal chart. So, when it comes to the other areas of life that people are typically interested in, it's money, career, job, and relationships. So let's talk money first. So, to ascertain your money situation, there's two houses that you would look at, your second house and your eighth house. So, your second house is the house of your personal finances. And for you, that is Capricorn. Capricorn is very structured. Capricorn is very by the book. Capricorn is very big business. Capricorn is the boss. So when it comes to how you personally make money, how you accumulate assets, you do it in a very Capricorn kind of way. So you're very boss like. You could be a boss or have a very authoritative role or job, which is what pays you. You could also be an expert at something, which is how you generate income for yourself. Either way, you're very practical, down to earth, and structured when it comes to your personal finances. Now, the eighth house is shared finances and debt. And for you, that is Cancer. So, whereas your personal finances, as ruled by Capricorn, you're very structured and serious, When it comes to other people's money, you tend to be a lot more sensitive, a lot more intuitive, and very sort of fluctuating, moody, if you will. Think about Cancerian energy. So, your debt, how you take on debt, how you deal with debt, how you accumulate other people's assets, or how other people's assets relate to you can be very cyclical since Cancer is ruled by the moon. It could also be very waxing and waning. Maybe sometimes you're really dependent on other people's money. Maybe sometimes you're not. The eighth house can also represent like investments. And so you may be someone who cyclically invests in stocks or bonds or whatever it is. Either way, you're very sensitive, intuitive, and cyclical when it comes to other people's money. So now let's talk relationships. And the natal chart is full of houses that deal with relationships, but the ones that people want to know most about are their romantic relationships. And so for that, there's two houses that we also look at: the fifth house of romance and the seventh house of committed partnerships. Now, I already talked about your seventh house being Gemini, so we covered that. When it comes to your fifth house deals with like dating and non committal relationships, right? The romantic part of your life. And for you, that is Aries. So this is interesting. Now, Aries is also a fire sign, just like Sagittarius. And so there's this energy of passion that's very much inherent in your romantic life. However, Aries is really more so about the thrill of the chase than actual commitment. So this makes perfect sense for the fifth house being Aries, because you could be a serial dater. You're one who probably initiates your romantic relationships. They could be really hot and heavy, very physical even. But when it comes to commitment, maybe not so much. And notice sort of the juxtaposition of the energies between your fifth house and your seventh house. Fifth house being Aries, seventh house being Gemini. These are both signs that wouldn't necessarily be classified as commitment types. It's very much sort of social, flitting about, the thrill of the chase, sort of temporary. And it's not to say that you are someone who'll never be in a committed relationship. It is perhaps to say that it may be a little difficult to tie you down. And that's not a bad thing by any means necessary. All right. And so finally, let's take a look at career and job. So we already talked about your career with your 10th house being Virgo. So now we need to talk about your 9 to 5 job, your day to day activities, and that would be represented by your 6th house. And for you, your 6th house is Taurus. So you essentially are a workhorse. Taurus is a sign that really puts in the work. They are a foundation builder. They're someone who is no stranger to hard work. So on a day-to-day basis, you're probably working really hard. You may have also had your particular job, your 9 to 5 situation, for a long time, because Taurus is very stable. When it comes to your daily routine and when it comes to what you do on a daily basis for work, you want stability. You're not someone who's going to be looking for a new job every 6 months. You'll likely stay in a position for a long time, or at least stay in an industry for a long time. But most importantly, when it comes to work, you're probably viewed as someone who's dependable. Taurus usually does tough tasks and tasks that are typically routine. And so, on the day to day basis and in your 9 to 5, people may really rely upon you for stuff because they know that you'll get it done. And you're someone who can put in a lot of work and put in a lot of hours. So, make sure that you're not being taken advantage of. The one thing about Taurus is Taurus will put in the hard work, but Taurus definitely wants the rewards. So make sure that you are being fairly compensated for all of the work that you are doing, because you are someone, again, who could be a workhorse and someone who could really put in the hours and the effort to get a job done. All right, so that just skims the surface when it comes to the areas of life and your natal chart. And if you're interested, you may want to sign up to attend one of my free live workshops where I talk about your natal chart, give you a great introduction, and really introduce you to some of the more important and interesting elements of your natal chart. If you're interested, link is in the description box below and it is tagged to this video. So now let's get into a really interesting facet of your rising sign, and that is what you don't know about yourself. So, if you don't already know, let me be the first to tell you, or if you do already know, let me remind you that astrology is everything. Think of your natal chart, right? It's a wheel. And so, your natal chart really represents the totality of who you are. Now, like I said before, the houses represent the different areas of life, right? And so, basically, all of the areas of life are represented in the natal chart. Now, one of the houses that I love to look at and examine is the 12th house, because the 12th house represents the house or the area of life that is hidden to us. So, we all have a shadow side, and many of us are aware of our shadow side, and many of us aren't. And what's most important about your shadow side is that your shadow side is typically what is driving the car. So, whatever you're experiencing in your reality, particularly what's running on your subconscious programming, is what you're seeing in your reality. And so, if things aren't necessarily going according to how you think they should, or you're not experiencing what you necessarily want to experience, understanding your 12th house will shed light on this so that you can make changes. All right. And so the 12th house represents the side of you that you either have no idea about or that maybe you've even tried to ignore, right? Maybe because you don't like it or it doesn't necessarily fit with your ego, right? So, as a Sagittarius rising, your 12th house is Scorpio. Now, remember at the beginning of this video, I said that Scorpio is about being down in the depths and the trenches, and Sagittarius is being high in the sky in a different stratosphere, right? This is the essence of you. Forward facing and sort of your consciousness is very much high in the sky and in a different stratosphere. However, what lurks beneath is a lot of darkness, and that's a good thing. You know, Scorpio energy can be very misunderstood. And if you don't know about Scorpio energy, check out my last video on Scorpio rising. It's a great video all about Scorpio energy. However, it can be very dark. It can be very dark. It can be kind of ugly. It shows us the ugly part of life and perhaps the ugly parts of ourselves. And this is what is your hidden self, right? You may be so focused on the bigger picture, on being in, a different stratosphere, on expanding your mind that you often probably neglect the depth within you. Like I said before, Sagittarius energy is very optimistic and Scorpio energy is much less so. Not to say that Scorpio is pessimistic, it is to say that Scorpio is realistic and will take a real look at the ugly things, even the beautiful things, but everything in its totality, okay? However, Scorpio energy is very powerful. When you understand your shadow and when you integrate your shadow into your being so that you are a whole, holistic person, that is where your power lies. And so, even though a lot of people tend to shy away from Scorpio energy or they tend to shy away from their shadow selves, that's where your true power lies. And that's very much the case for you as a Sagittarius rising. Your power, your magnetism lies within. And maybe you consider yourself lucky, right? Maybe even if you don't consider yourself lucky, maybe others consider you lucky. Maybe it's like things just happen to fall into your lap. I'll guarantee it's because you're magnetizing it with your 12th house Scorpio. Scorpio is ruled by Mars and Pluto. It's like a huge magnet. And so everything that is in your reality is probably a result of what is being magnetized to you through that Scorpio 12th house. And so it would really benefit you to take the time to understand your shadow side more so than any other zodiac sign because your shadow sign is the sign of shadows, which is Scorpio. So understand that that's where your power lies and get comfortable with it. It's almost like making friends with your demons. And this isn't meant to be like a religious thing or like, oh, demons are bad. No, just your shadow side is the side that hasn't seen the light of day. Or perhaps it's things that you deem ugly or that society deems repugnant, right? Understand that and integrating that is key because even if your subconscious, right, as expressed through your Scorpio 12th house, is magnetizing great things to you, when you understand the power of your shadow side, now you can be conscious about what you magnetize. So if things are good now, understanding your shadow side can only make them better. Again, that is where your power lies. That Scorpio power that's within you is magnetic and very sexy. So, some of you may really be sexy on the low. Dare I say, some of you may be even a little freaky on the low. Like, someone's got to get to really, really know you in order to bring that side out of you. Or some of you have yet to explore that, right? Scorpio has a lot to do with sex also. So, maybe Growing up, sex could have really been a taboo. Maybe you experience sexual shame or trauma. And so that's a part of your life, maybe that you have really stuffed deep down into the recesses of your soul. Explore that, right? Again, that is where your power lies. I love the 12th house because it really shows us who we truly are. It's not that the other houses don't. It's just that we really understand who we are at the core of our being because it shows us what we're not conscious of. And then when we can integrate that, honey, the sky is not even the limit. All right, my loves. So that concludes this video on Sagittarius rising. I sincerely hope that you were able to get at least one important piece of information that you can use going forward. Speaking of information, for information on my products and services, including my free live weekly workshop, actually it's not weekly, it's bi-weekly, but my free live bi-weekly workshop, all of that is in the description box below and links to this video. All right, my loves, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in my next video. Take care.